Hi, everybody. Tom Murphy here again. Thanks for jumping on Men Talk Shop and Life Admin. Today, we have a very special guest. He's one of our cast of characters, but really felt that we needed to kind of bring him in, and he's had quite a life. And with that, we have Dr. Leo Sandy. I'm going to just give a little bit of a background to Leo before we jump in. I first met Leo in Lowell, Massachusetts in 1977. And we've remained, I don't know how or why, but we've remained friends since that period of time over the decades. Also know his family very close with that. And so there's an awful lot of memories, personal and professional, that I have independently, and you'll hear from our good friend Tom Panis online. Tom is also a friend of Leo's from decades. And just to give a very, very spot type of profile, and one of the things that I always remembered when I first started to work with Leo was that Leo described himself as a juvenile delinquent that went to college. And that was just something that always struck and always reminded me. But Leo was a person that grew up in a kind of depressed mill town in Massachusetts called Lowell. And at which point, from that point, grew up there, went into the Navy. Leo got married in Lowell. And at which point came out of the service. And again, I'm just going to kind of throw things. But Leo then pursued college, at which point, a location where he met Tom Panis, one of our good friends, and came out of college and began to work also in school systems as a, quote, school psychologist. Leo also pursued a doctoral level in education along those lines in Boston, again, in the area of school psychology counseling area. And Leo also did a track, one of the many things he did with a college as a college instructor called Rivier College in Nashua, New Hampshire. And at which point the family, his wife and young family moved up to New Hampshire, Lake Winnipesaukee area in New Hampshire, and began a life and career there that also included a whole shift into becoming a college professor. Did that for many, many years, and still has a piece of that going on. Is going to be doing special course coming up in the fall here of 2021, but also did a variety of things that it would take me a long time to describe, but one of which in working with men in jail, men in prison, around relationships and male psychology and parenting and a whole bunch of stuff that was really quite fascinating. Leo also had been involved in Veterans for Peace movement over the decades since he come out of the service. So he's really kind of that description of the modern Renaissance man, politician, athlete, and scholar. And just has had an incredible life. So I really wanted to see if we could kind of highlight that a bit. So with that very brief, scant intro of my old friend Leo Sandy, I'd like to jump in and with my first set of questions, and we'll be pulling in Tom Panis with that. But Leo, I was just wondering how you're doing and feeling today with this whole thing of jumping in with your life and providing pictures and kind of going over this is your life, and kind of how you're doing with all of that today as we jump in.
I think it's going to be a nice nostalgic trip.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've seen some smiles, and I can say that as being a certified wise guy, you're not the easiest audience. So when I see, when I crack, there's a smile there, I said, all right, boom, we've made it. Tough audience here with Leo. So kind of jumping in with that in mind, Leo, could you kind of begin to fill us in a bit of, and I think it's kind of interesting with that upbringing and what was some of that 50s, early 60s, where you went from that background into going into the Navy? What was kind of behind that piece a little bit for us?
Yeah, I was, I had a single mother, and she was a mill worker, spinner, and I went to a lot of poor schools, did not do well in junior high, dropped out of high school. I just had no interest in school, although I did love learning. I'd read books and so forth, and watch documentaries on TV and so forth. So I was very interested in learning, but I hated school
Mhm.
because I just didn't think it was consistent with learning.
Right.
And so and I get we all we did in the late 50s we cruised around with our cars, looking for girls, drinking, same old stuff every day, and I just got like sick of it.
Right.
I felt like I was going nowhere. I was working in a factory for $1 an hour, and I said I just can't keep doing this. So I decided to join the Navy and see the world, mostly to get away from my life
Uh-huh.
and see what opportunities are, see what the world looks like, and so that's what's motivated me. I was bored, and I just didn't see any future.
Now, Duke, with that in mind, how would you describe briefly in terms of how long you were in, but you had this dream, you were bored, you were frustrated, you really weren't, quote, any model student by anybody's standards at all, don't go in the Navy, quote, to see the world. How, with those expectations, how did you find it during those years and kind of looking back on that experience?
Oh, it was kind of horrible in some ways, and good in some other ways. The regimentation, the uniformity, the obedience, the conformity. It was like jumping from a frying pan into the fire. It was awful. It was a tug, and it was even more. There was even more tedium out at sea. You'd work 12 on and 12 off, and all you'd see every day is the ocean.
Right.
It was pretty boring, and there's a lot of petty stuff, with rank and so forth, and people giving you orders and kind of being like sadistic, enjoying their power trips, basically. So I didn't like that part of it, and the caste system that existed in the military, I didn't like. So, but
Yeah,
I
I'm
met
sorry. Go ahead.
I met good friends. I got to see numerous 7 or 8 countries, and then met 3 ports like within countries. For example, 3 or 4 in Greece, just Corfu, Athens, Rhodes, and so forth. And every country, we went to like 3 or 4 ports, so I got to see quite a bit of the world.
Gotcha.
Fascinating.
So, with that in mind, you come out of the Navy. What is your world at that time?
Well, I needed a job, so I worked as a mail boy for a major a think tank in Bedford, Massachusetts, I think it was. And that was, I being a mail boy didn't have a lot of intellectual stimulation to it. And it was very interesting. This one guy named John Alberto, every time I delivered mail to his office, he would harass me about going back to school. It got to the point where I would walk by his office and look and see when his head was turned the other way, throw the mail in and run like hell. But he wouldn't let up. And so I figured, this guy believes in me. I'm going to believe in myself. I'm going to take his advice and go back to school. And it was that guy, that charismatic adult, who really pushed me to the point of being bullying for me to go back to school, and I attribute that to him. And I tried to thank him later on, but this place is all confidential. It's all government work, so they don't tell you where he is, if he's still working there, is at nothing. So I could not find him anymore.
So this individual becomes obviously a significant influence, impact on you at that time, really with you can do more with your life, kind of pushing you towards education. How did you end up at that point then connecting to, I believe it was the University of Massachusetts in Boston, at which point you met one of our cast with Tom Panis. How did you get in, start that process, change, and how did it begin to change your life forward?
Well, I wanted to go to a junior college to begin with because I only finished the 10th grade. So although I did a year at Newman Prep to try to make up 4 years in 1 year, but I was still very hesitant to go to a full 4-year college. So, I applied to Merrimack College. They rejected me. So I applied to UMass and they accepted me. And I said, okay, I'm going for it. If you're a veteran, UMass is a federal land-grant college. So if you pass their test, English 4, Algebra 2, if you pass their test, they have to accept you. There's no quota limitations on veterans. They have to take everybody who passes the test. So I get in. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do it. My first grade was a D- in a 50-word essay in English 101. Scared the hell out of me. So I went to talk to the professor. He gave me some advice. I get back on the track, and I was fine from then on.
So you take this advice, you were able to take this advice, get on track. Now, at which point do I understand that is where you met Tom Panis, one of our cast?
Yeah, it's probably the first week of classes. I was going into the elevator, and Tom came in, or I was in the elevator and Tom came in, or vice versa. And I recognized his picture because they print a whole list of freshmen pictures, little background, where you're from, so forth. And I recognized his face because I was looking for where what kids were from. And he's from Dracut, so I'm from Dracut. So I said, you're from Dracut? And he said, oh yeah. And so we struck up a conversation, and then he started to commute with us to Boston.
Tom, are you there? I think Tom may have, there he is. No?
I'm here. I was muted, but yeah, I remember that.
Okay. Tom, any visualizations, quick visualizations you can give of this guy that you met on an elevator asking you some things, and at which point you become friends, you commute, and begins this relationship, from the 60s?
Sure, a few things. One, I still remember, Leo, your smile. Leo's a tall guy, and I'm not very tall. He's looking down at me with a nice grin, and I felt very comfortable. And then, like Leo said, we started commuting. A couple of things. Over the years, I've always associated you, Leo, with stability, and you can always rely on Leo. When Leo says he's going to do something or be somewhere at a specific time, he's there. There's never any postponing or change of plans. Just one example, I was taking a bus to New Hampshire in the middle of a bad snowstorm, and Leo had to drive a long way to meet me at the bus stop. And I was cold and hungry. And he was there right on time. No excuses, no snowstorm. And the other quick story, Tom, I want to share is when I went through a rough period of divorce and cancer and so forth, I was kind of isolated. And Leo said to me, I think, Leo, you were living in New Hampshire at the time. He said, mi casa, su casa. In Spanish, my house is your home. And I don't know if you remember, Leo, I visited for 3 days. It was magic. It snowed for 3 days. They let me go, Leo and Pearl, I went snowshoeing, we talked. I remember I'd been living in a YMCA. I mean, it was awful. I was very isolated and depressed, and in the middle of divorce and foreclosure. And I remember the smell of coffee in the morning. And it seemed so normal. And I remember Pearl saying to me, Tom, I'm sorry if the bed isn't very comfortable. And I want to say, Pearl, I've been living on this stupid YMCA, man, this is luxury, And one final thing, that was a healing weekend for me. And I began to turn things around. I remember when Leo and Pearl drove me to the bus station, the train station, they didn't just say goodbye. They waited until the train left. It must have been 15. They just waited. I remember looking out, and it gave me a nice feeling of stability. So Leo and I, once in a while, I say brother Leo, he says brother Tom. He's kind of like, I was an only child, a little bit of an older brother, very stable, very reliable.
Well, I can certainly attest to many of those types of things of when Leo says something, I can pretty much count as it being, that's the standard, that's the truth, it's going to happen. So with that, Leo, you then here is this background, just incredible. You finish college, you're out in the world, and then you're going back to college again, only in this case into master's and doctoral level. You pass and get through, flying colors. And again, we've got some shots of some of those types of things. You go back and you're working in Lowell, Massachusetts, and then going to New Hampshire with family and beginning in school systems there. Leo, in looking back at some of those really development successes, but what were some of the things that you look back that got you through those? Some of what, for lack of a better term, a resiliency toolbox, how did you get through those times that, were much more of a challenge? You may have not had the beginning, reservoir of a lot of those things in terms of growing up the way you describe it. How did you begin to take those and then move forward and create and then get into so many of these other areas of life?
I started school about 3 days after I was married, went full time. After I got my bachelor's, I finished my master's in a year at BU. And then I worked for about 8 years. And then I decided I wanted actually, I started teaching college part-time. And I only had my master's doing it. And I really felt like I wanted to do that all the time. And I knew I had to have a doctorate to do that. So I think that was the, I was in school psychology. I kind of liked that, but I like teaching even more. So that I think that did it. That experience teaching at part-time at Rivier College in 72, I think it was when I started, and that got me going back. And of course, I worked substitute taught 2 or 3 days a week. I delivered appliances on the weekend, and I went to classes at night at BU. So there wasn't a heck of a lot of time, and raising kids too at the same time. It was tough, but I was so busy and so focused that I really didn't have time to think too much about anything except keeping my eye on the prize.
And you certainly had to. If you were just quickly, what would you now look at or define as, quote, eye on the prize? During those early years and doing all of those things, working in 7 days a week, et cetera, what was the prize? What was the eye on the prize that you were focused on?
Getting my doctorate was the prize, and then doing the thing I liked the best full time, and then because after that, Rivier offered me a full-time job, so that was good. But I think I also have to say that without Pearl, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Pearl, your wife, yeah.
Yeah, she did everything. I mean, she cleaned, cooked, took care of the kids. While I
took care of the kids and did all of that. That's just incredible, incredible. And I've certainly, as you know, I've had a very special relationship with Pearl over many years with that. If we kind of slide into, and I know we're just scratching the surface, Leo, but once you got into the university system, you hit the prize in some ways of university professor. We're doing that years and involved in voluntary community type things. And at which point you then became a grandfather. And it seemed to me, again, also a very new chapter, and being very, very much a part of that child's life, and pictures and videos and poems, and being a part of that. But in taking all of those experiences, you're still having contact with a lot of different types of pieces of the world between teaching and volunteer activities, et cetera. When you were working with children, and you've done a tremendous amount of writing about this, looking back, but also now, what is it most do you think that kids need, quote, nowadays, and the type of advice that you give? What is it that's missing or needed most with kids today in all of the incredible amount of stressors that they experience?
Well, there's one word, basically, relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That's what because within relationship, there's communication, there's love, there's empathy, and so forth. So relationship is the umbrella that covers just about a lot of things. And so we have kids now that hook up on weekends and don't avoid intimacy, you know, at all costs. So we have this real fear of relationships, getting involved. And we communicate, we have Facebook friends, but not many real friends. You know, we're in a situation where we can be in lack civility because we can't. We're online. No one can do anything to us.
Right.
So, we wouldn't do a lot of things we do face to face online.
Yeah, absolutely. Leo, question, and I'd like to bring Tom in. One of the things that I was always very fascinated by and interested because, you know, I've been involved in a variety of things in human services, social work, mental health, employee assistance programs, et cetera. But I had always was fascinated with some of the work with men in prison and in jail that you've done. I wonder if you could just touch a little bit about that experience, what your role was with them, and what you felt they needed and how you attempted to try to provide that.
Well, I had one Vietnam veteran who was he and his daughter are both in jail for drug offenses, and he fought me tooth and nail on my lessons, and he was really a pain. But you know, over time I watched him change quite a bit, and he got to the point where he would give other people hell if they disagreed with me. You know, he was amazing. After he got out, we had a conference at Plymouth State on incarcerated people and parenting and so forth. He had gotten out, and he came to the conference, and he spoke about his experiences at the prison, at the Family Communication Center, Communication Center, and he was very he was a changed person, and his daughter had gotten out of jail too. And I heard many years later that he was working successfully and doing very well. Very interesting. One incident comes to mind. I had a guy way in the back, and he didn't say anything the whole class, and a lot of them participate. So I said at the end, I said, you know, you didn't say anything. I'd like to know what your thoughts are. He says, you know, I can't talk and process at the same time. So I'm trying to listen to what you're saying, and if I talk, I'm going to interfere with that. So it gave me a new perspective about people who are quiet in class. You know, some people learn by talking, other people learn just more by listening. And so that was an interesting experience. Another guy, he freaked out when he saw a video of a simulation of a father hitting a child. I was teaching about corporal punishment, and he freaked out. He said, "That's my father." And of course, it wasn't his father, but that's, you know, and he never connected the fact that he was in prison with the way he was treated by his father. It's interesting. A lot of these people blame themselves. They think that they are their crime. They can't separate the two. And so getting them to make that separation means developing relationships with them, getting them to believe in themselves, and giving them some hope. I also showed, every class I showed a peacemaker, a famous peacemaker. And I said, look, you can look at these guys two ways. One, you know, these people are so great, makes me even feel worse about myself. Or these people are great. I may never be as great as they are, but I can still do something with the rest of my life. And so I said, that's your choice how you look at these. But I just want you to see what some people have done in the world. And so I do that every class.
Well, with that, I mean, there's so many pieces to that. Tom, I'm wondering if any of what Leo was describing is things that we've all talked about, experienced a bit, to bring that into some of the experiences that Leo was talking about.
Well, I think a couple of things. I did go with Leo once when he was teaching in jail. And that was really something, because I think Leo was very composed. I was a little scared. I just, not that I was going to be attacked, it's just to be in that environment. And Leo was very composed. And, you know, Leo, I think you really touched some lives, as you said. And I do think Leo's concept of eye on the prize is really valuable. I mean, something to live by. You keep your eye on the prize, keep going, which Leo did.
I like the piece also, Leo, that you were talking about of trying to look at, offer, educate, insert this dichotomy of you have a choice. You can look at it this way, you can look at it that way. There's certainly multiple views, as we know, but I like that piece of, yep, here is your experience, here is what you've gone through, but what do you want to do with that experience? How do you take that? And like you were talking about, how does the person process to say, you know, you actually might have some choices of what you want to do with this from here, whether it be abuse or neglect or drugs or parental, et cetera, but there may be that piece of, yep, how do I do that? And even on a daily basis of saying, well, one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 month at a time, whatever it is for the person, of how can we begin to instill that, excuse me, and make that a daily part of our experience. So, well, it leaves me with an awful lot to be thinking about this whole process with, particularly with our group, but with Leo, and going over all the pictures that he sent and some of our experiences over the decades a bit, and want to kind of parallel what Tom was saying about some of my experiences with Leo over the year. And I'd like to kind of look at maybe wrapping this piece up a bit with Leo. At this particular point in your life, you don't have to say what age you are, unless you choose to, you have the choice. But at this particular point in life, what are the types of things that give you joy? That, how does the prize move? How does the prize of what it was before a doctorate education to a career, et cetera? But what might be some of the pieces at this point in your life you can share with us about the prize and how it fits into pursuits from here?
Yeah, I'm trying to finish a book that I've co-written with a couple of people. So that's a slow process, but hopefully we're getting back on track in September. And keeping up my part-time teaching, I think it keeps me intellectually stimulated. I'm busy with my horse, busy with my yard work. Pearl and I play Yahtzee a lot. We have some favorite TV programs, so our days are pretty full, actually. You know, Zoom meetings. I got another Zoom meeting right after this with the college. So just making sure that I've got a variety of things to do, and that I'm feeling fulfilled. So, you know, with the horse and the teaching and the writing and the things like that, email friends, Facebook, you know, the whole gamut, pretty much chews up the whole day.
It does.
So,
it does.
yeah.
Well, you know, with that, I really want to thank you very, very much, not just for doing this today, obviously, but thank you for being in my life since the 70s, and also with Pearl and the kids along those lines, and through your connection, you know, in that circle with Tom Panis, and some of the experiences we've had, you know, over the years a bit. And Tom, thanks a lot. Do you have any last thoughts, comments, questions, or little digs we can give the big guy before we wrap up for today? Okay. So with that in mind, again, folks, thanks for logging in and hearing some of our stories, and love to hear some of yours, and that information is provided. So thanks a lot. Appreciate it, folks. Take care till the next time. Bye-bye.